Hi, class. I want to talk to you a little bit about the first genre or part of your project that you're going to be doing for this research project. And it's called an annotated reference list. Some people call it annotated bibliography, but in Turabian, we say reference list. And it's a very simple process, and it's a way of organizing your research and helping you estimate how reliable and useful sources are going to be for you. So you might have done something similar. For example, you might have done a literature review, which is where you compile the history of a particular subject and then you present it before you present your research. And that is a similar process that we all go through. There's no reason for us to present research that's already been done before. And so therefore doing a literature review or an annotated reference list is a way for us to get a full spectrum of what has been written about this subject so that we're not just, first of all, saying the same thing someone else has said, or we're writing out of ignorance. And that's the worst, where you don't see both sides of an argument, you write from a limited perspective, and therefore your readers don't really trust you because they're like, this person didn't actually read that much about the subject or know in depth what that subject is about. So annotated reference lists are a really great way to see how much you've compiled about a particular subject. I'm going to show you an example reference list that I wrote in the research writing class that I did. So it's just an opportunity. This was 10 years ago, so it gives you an idea to see what it was like, how it was used. Let me go ahead and share this one with you. And it's a very useful document that I still use for writing research papers. So I did my subject on, is the SAT basically a good is the SAT a good estimation of a student's success in college? So that's what I narrowed down my thesis, was basically saying there's a lot of ways to determine whether a student's going to be a good student or not, and is the SAT the best way to do that? I'll just say no, and we can talk more about my feelings about that later. But I was able to find a lot of different articles about this subject. And you'll see in my annotations, after I cite the source, I say, I'm not quite sure if I'll use this article in my essay because it does not show any position on the SAT. It is a question and answer. This is just a very simple online source that I found from US News and World Report. Now, in this case, you don't necessarily need to say in my essay, but basically say like in my thesis or in my proposal, is this going to be helpful in arguing whatever point I want to argue? And we can talk about later. If you prefer to say project, that's fine. I use a class profile from Stanford. I use a New York Times article. I use one from the Washington Post. So these might not seem super scholarly. California students do well on AP exams. Okay, so this is a ProQuest one. Number diversity of SAT takers at all-time high. This is from the new College Board survey. New test wouldn't solve SAT problem, USA Today, EBSCOhost. These are all very interesting, different ways that I've gone and found out as much as I can about the source. And I write usually 2 to 3 sentences about how this is going to help me. This is what an annotated reference list is. It's a way for you to organize your research and to keep it all in one place and with your initial thoughts on how it's going to help you. I cannot tell you how important this is. It's going to determine how well the rest of your project goes based on the amount of research that you do and the wide range that you get. Even if a source you don't find is completely credible, you're kind of wondering if it is, this is a good place to write it in the annotation so you can have a clear perspective on how well is this going to help me. The other thing that's really important when looking through a source and asking certain questions is it peer reviewed? And these are things that you can write in your annotation. I want to show you one that I recently did in a college class and to show you how it's developed. I just actually did this last semester, and I'll show you kind of the differences in what it looks like and hopefully give you an idea of how annotated reference lists develop. So I had to do an annotated reference list in my master's course last semester, and this is what it looked like. I talk about audience-based pedagogy in the college writing classroom. So talking about why audience is so vital when you're writing your papers. So here I have a philosophical article about threshold concepts in the writing classroom, and I write a lot about it. I have another one from audience addressed, audience invoked. Again, these are peer-reviewed articles, much more in depth. Again, more articles, writing a ton about them and how I'm going to use it in my paper. A ton. Limited Purposes, Narrow Audiences by Dan Meltzer. I just go on and on about audience in college, and I've tried to do as much research as I can about this subject to see how we can develop composition studies in the future using audience-based pedagogy. So it just shows that like this is a tool, it's a genre of writing, it's a particular format that we'll continue to use. I like to bold them just so you can kind of see the distinction between the citation and the rest of it. So it's like a regular citation list, but with paragraphs included, or what we call annotations, to talk about what I gain from it. It's a great place to put good quotes that you think, I might use this quote in my paper. Think about how much time you'll be saving yourself if you start annotating now. And then when you go to write a project or do a project, you've already saved them in this reference list with the citation here. It's so important. One of the biggest ways to avoid plagiarism is to be diligent in your citations and in your annotations. I will say most of the time, 99% of the time, plagiarism happens by being sloppy. It means going and reading stuff and never writing down what you read. It means just gathering all this information and never categorizing it. But this is the first thing that I do when I do research. I start putting my citations down. If I even have an inkling that I might use this source in some future project or in my argument, I compile a reference list. So we're starting with that, and then we'll move on to our next project. This will be due not this week, but next week. And so I'm giving you this information now so that you can be preparing. Don't wait until next week to start looking for sources. Start putting them into a Word document now so that you can be prepared for next week. I hope this helps you. I hope it gave you a little bit of insight on what an annotated reference list is, and hopefully relieve some fears if you were nervous about it. You will need to have at least 10 sources, and again, they can be varying in how you find them. It doesn't have to all be on ProQuest. Some of them can be journal online, can be newspaper. Sometimes they can even be Twitter accounts if you feel like this is a good place that you found something that's important. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we're developing finding sources and working with sources next week. But this is a great start, and hopefully it gives you a little bit of insight on what your next step is going to be.